Yeah, no, this is arguably one of the most difficult videos I think I've ever had to make on this platform. And as I thought about making it, I had doubts as to whether or not I should, because it was going to expose something, or make me rather face something that I don't like facing, which is vulnerability. Not my biggest strength. Work in progress. And so I contemplated, but I ended up shooting it anyways, as you can see. And that's because this platform is designed to have conversations, some of which are uncomfortable. And this one is quite an uncomfortable one for me. Yeah. On the 18th of July 2010, I underwent the most painful experience of my life thus far. That's not even arguable. While the rest of South Africa was celebrating the World Cup, I lost my sister that day, the 18th of July 2010. I'll never forget it. Not only is it Nelson Mandela's birthday, but on that day, my sister had come to visit me for the longest time, and she never did that. So just the entire day had abnormal activity when it came to her. She cooked, she cleaned, watched a couple of movies, and I had some of my friends around at my place, and then she left, just as she would. And that day I was supposed to take my laundry to go with her to go and wash it at her res, because I remember I just started working, I didn't have a washing machine, and that's something we would occasionally do. But on that day I was quite lazy. I remember thinking, no, I don't want to actually. And then she was like, okay, fine. And I'll never forget, she left and she said bye-bye. And I wasn't even looking at her when she left. And then I continued to look at my computer or watch what I was watching, and I said bye. And that was the last time I saw her alive. A few hours later, I received a call saying that she had been in an accident. Now, my immediate response was to think, okay, it's something minor. Maybe she broke a leg or something like that. On my way there, I was in a cab, I remember. I was there with one of my friends, and she got another call to tell her that no, it's not a minor accident. My sister had passed away from a car accident. I will never forget the feeling that I had. It's like the life was drained out of me that day, in that moment. You know, as you grow up, especially when you're younger, my sister and I were quite close. We grew up and death was a foreign concept to us. You know, you'd hear about, someone's mother passing away, or someone who lived down the road from us passing away, but it was never close enough for me to be able to identify any kind of emotion to it, and glue it to anything significant in my life, because I'd never gone through it. But that day, when I got to the scene, my sister wasn't waking up. She was gone. She was covered. It really was her. She was wearing the same jacket, same everything. I think I was numb for most parts of that day. Fortunately, her boyfriend also came through and to the scene, and thank God for him, because he was a source of strength for me. We waited for her body to be picked up, and I was only 21 years old. 21 years old. And I had to call my parents and tell them, of the tragedy that just occurred. That was hard. That was it was quite difficult. And then I also, the following week, had to go and identify her body. Throughout this entire experience, I remember feeling like I was in in a movie, like in some sort of film, like in disbelief. I was like fog. Things were just happening so fast that I had no moment to take it in, to take in what it means when I say that my sister is no more. I didn't have the time to do that. Then we went into the funeral process, and you know how it is in the African culture. I think most of us can relate to this when I say you're taught you must be strong. When your enemies cannot see you weak. So I remember I never cried at my sister's funeral. I spoke, I remember speaking, and that was that. I remember seeing her casket go down. Yeah. So now, after the funeral has taken place and the people have left and they've eaten and they've grieved and they've paid their respects, that is when the grieving process actually begins, because now you need to reconcile yourself with the fact that that person is never coming back. Each and every thing about your life is a constant reminder that that person was there and now they are no more. I'm telling you, the reality of that is the most painful reality I have ever gone through. Grief is hard, especially when you are not given the freedom or not even allowing yourself the freedom to mourn, to really go through it and grieve and cry. And I was just, I remember crying here and there, but for the longest part, I harbored a lot of emotions. I harbored anger towards God, questioning why her, you know, why couldn't it be me instead? I mean, resentment. And I moved away from God completely because I was like, what kind of God allows things like this to happen? Why to me? Why would you let me go through something like this? I contemplated why I was here for the longest time, for a good 5 years. That's what I enjoyed. Every single day was like waking up and why am I still here? Why? And those are the consequences, I suppose, of not properly grieving someone and not allowing yourself to grieve, because you're in a constant bubble of disbelief and you hold some sort of hope that this person is going to come back. And every day you wake up to the painful reality that they're not. And you watch people continue with their lives as though that person never existed, and rightfully so. And as life would have it, once you don't deal with grief head on and you learn the importance of acceptance, every time you face death, it's like piling on pain. It's just an additional pain, because 3 years later, I lost my grandmother after she had endured a long-term sickness, and it was a similar process in how I dealt with it. I was strong. It happens. It is what it is. This is life. When the truth of the matter is, if I had dealt with the grief of even my sister, I would have been able to really properly mourn my grandmother. And I only started doing that much later. And that is sad, because you go through most of your life, I know I did, harboring so much hatred, and you don't have any direction. I remember not wanting to be close to anyone in my life because I felt as though they were going to leave anyways. You're going to leave, so I'd rather have some sort of control as to how close I let you come, because I just felt like people in my life end up dying in some way or form, you know? And I was trying, in a way, to have some sort of control over life versus death. I also remember quite distinctively having such a big fear of dying for the longest time. That was my biggest fear, death, to a point where I never lived. I didn't live. I really didn't. I lived every day as though something might happen, in suspicion, in suspense, on some, okay, whatever car comes over. I avoided, because I was still living in Pretoria at the time where my sister had passed away. I remember always avoiding that road for the longest time, not going through it, because what if the same thing were to happen to me? You know, all of those things. All because I'd never properly grieved her. I had never. And the point of this video is less so about painting my experiences, but more on grief and the importance of how we grieve. Grief is not about forgetting that the person existed. Not at all. If anything, it's to celebrate that they did. It's about gratitude and being grateful for the fact that they were in your life for X number of years, that you had the esteemed privilege of knowing them for so long when other people didn't, or other people might, but not in the extent in which you knew them. Grief is about accepting that they added great and immense value in your life, and that you loved them deeply, accepting that they've contributed in your life to such an extent that being without them makes you feel broken. It makes you feel lonely, it makes you upset, it makes you angry. And embracing all of those emotions and allowing yourself to go through all of that, understanding fully that they are never coming back. But just because they're never coming back doesn't mean your life stops. So often we are so consumed with the pain that comes with losing someone. Because we haven't grieved, we allow that pain to make life lasting and life altering decisions that are swaying us from getting to where we are destined to get to. You don't let people in, people that should be in your life, people that should be imparting wisdom, value, love, worth in your life, because you're so afraid that you are going to lose them. Because you haven't grieved, you end up taking certain people in your life for granted. You treat them badly. Because you haven't grieved, you end up making decisions about your life that are nowhere near to where you ought to be. Essentially, because you haven't grieved, you are punishing yourself. In the process of doing that, you are punishing the very person that you have lost as well, because they are not resting in peace. Life is for the living. They would want you to live. I know that now, that my sister, wherever she is, my grandmother, wherever she is, she would want me to be living my life to the full and live it happily and joyfully, because I've been given the privilege of having a couple of years to live it. I always say that in life we know two things: we will be born and we will die. A lot of people often want to celebrate birth, which is purely natural, and that's fine. But we often forget that death is a reality of living. And with death, although there's pain, there is sadness, there's often a lot of hate that's harbored amongst that. There's an important lesson that needs to be learned. And that lesson can only be learned once we've grieved the person properly. There are people that, because you haven't grieved, other people in your life haven't gotten the pleasure of knowing those people. You don't want to talk about them because you haven't grieved. People need to know that certain people existed and the impact that those people made in your life. If you have a certain characteristic or a certain charm about you that you know you wouldn't have had unless, let's say, someone that you lost gave it to you, you owe it to the world to tell them about that person because you had that privilege of knowing that person. Let's not be selfish with what life has to offer us by getting stuck in the sadness of death and not embracing the positives that come with grieving a person's life. Remembering who that person is, what they've left behind, their legacy, and letting the world know that they were here. Grieving has no time period. Don't let the world dictate to you how long you should be grieving someone. Grief is personal. Allow yourself to mourn an individual for as long as you need to. Oftentimes, we want to fast track the mourning process because we want to carry on with the business of the day or life or these responsibilities have so much. But what's the point of that if you're not showing up as your best self when you're still in pain? You owe the world the best version of yourself, and you owe yourself the opportunity to be able to mourn and mourn properly. I will never take for granted that each and every day that I'm awake is another opportunity for me to show up and show up authentically to myself. Hence, one of my resolutions, as per my previous video, is to be the best human being possible. And for me, it's about how I impact lives. It's about making videos like this that make me uncomfortable, but talking about topics that are necessary. It's important to mourn. It's important that you know that I had a sister and she lived and she was incredible, that my grandmother was an amazing woman. But what's more important is that after 5 years of beating myself up about it, I learned to really mourn and really embrace their legacy and grieve the fact that they are never coming back. But what's more important is how I choose to live life from now on moving forward and the impact that they have had on my life and how that translates into every decision that I make and in me never taking life for granted. I hope that this video has helped you to channel your mindset towards having a positive outlook when it comes to grieving. Yes, it's painful, and you'll never know why. God does what God does because He is God. But there's nothing you can do about death. It's inevitable. It really is. I think what's more important is going through the mourning process and allowing yourself to accept that someone else is never coming back. I still mourn my sister. I'll never stop. I still mourn my grandmother, but I mourn them joyfully. It gets better with time, with acceptance. That's all I have for you today, guys. I know it was heavy, but I'm hoping that as heavy as it was, it made an impact. If you felt or that the video resonated with you in any way or form, if you've undergone a loss of someone and you're currently grieving, please do engage and let us try and help you through it, or tell us how you got through your grieving process. Anyways, as usual, thank you so much for always supporting this channel. I'm seeing the growth, I'm seeing the support, and I truly appreciate you all, and I love you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.